Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Sarah Davis with the Family Enterprise Center at Kennesaw State University. We are the nation's oldest center dedicated to supporting family-owned businesses, and we do that through expert-led education, guided peer groups, and a community built just for you. So today's webinar is part of our ongoing effort to provide practical tools to help you lead a more effective business and to grow sustainably. I am thrilled to introduce Jacqueline Jensen. She is a professional EOS implementer who's here to help us rethink how we run meetings. So she's going to show us how a weekly leadership meeting can become one of the most valuable tools in your business. So Jacqueline, we are so glad to have you here. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I am so excited to be here with you all today. And I know that you all are very busy entrepreneurs. And so you have probably had a crazy morning and you are jumping into this webinar. And I so appreciate you taking the time and investing in you and your business. So I am going to hop in and not take any more of your time, but I want you to go from this, crazy kind of you've been working in your business, and now we're going to take the next 60 minutes to invest in you and your business and work on your business. And the first step in doing that in a great way, I love to do it with teams I've worked with in the past, is to start with tell me something good. So for those of you who have been in the Atlanta area for a while, may have heard this from the Burt Show, but it is a philosophy that we use in EOS as well. So for anyone who feels comfortable, throw it into the chat. Something good, personally or professionally, from the last 7 days that's happened. Oftentimes we also don't take time as entrepreneurs to celebrate our successes. So this is a great opportunity to celebrate. I'm not going to have y'all on camera because I know it's also lunchtime, so I hope you're grabbing a bite for yourself. But I do hope that you'll interact with me a little through the chat throughout this presentation. So thank you so much for Jackie hopping in. I've only been managing people for about a year, and I'm able to share that my first promotion of one of my reports. Yay! Congrats, Jackie. And thank you so much for being here. So if don't feel comfortable sharing in the chat, just think to yourself something personally or professionally that is worth celebrating or has brought you joy in the last 7 days. And again, just a great practice that helps shift the mindset to a place of gratitude and brings you into the present. The next step Rob, thank you so much for sharing. The next step in a really great meeting is having an agenda. So generally you want to share that agenda in advance so that your team is prepared for what's coming. Our agenda today, I'm going to share a little bit about me and my story, a little about EOS, but that's not what today's meeting is about. It's about how to transform your meetings. So we'll jump into the meat and potatoes here, and then of course there'll be time at the end for a quick Q&A. So let's just jump into it. A little bit about me. I grew up in Big Canoe up in North Georgia, if anyone's familiar with that area. My brother, my mom, our dog, we always enjoyed hiking. When I was 11, my mom remarried, and so this is my stepfather joining our family. He was a lifelong entrepreneur, so this had a huge impact on my life. Our dinner conversations, maybe like you, generally revolved around the family business, goals, what challenges were being had. Rarely were we really talking about what we might do for fun that weekend as a family or where our next vacation would be. So that's a little of how, the environment I grew up in. Somehow I still found business to be fun. So we'll circle back to that. I like to joke, I really grew up in a barn. So I started writing at the age of 11. Growing up in a barn really taught me life lessons and skills that I continue to use today. Ultimately, I decided to jump to Southwest Florida and go to Florida Gulf Coast University, where I majored in business with a concentration in sport management. So I love the hospitality side of business. After graduating, my stepfather came down and had a little conversation with me, and perhaps it was an ultimatum that I was expected to return to Atlanta to work in the family business. So perhaps some of you can relate to this if you also grew up in a family business, and just that expectation and obligation you felt coming back. Ultimately, I felt like I needed to. So I did come back. The family business at the time was in oil and gas, nothing to do with hospitality or sports. But I did have the opportunity to learn a lot of really great business foundational basics. So I spent time in admin and finance and sales and marketing and lots of time in operations, way more time wearing a hard hat and steel-toed boots than I expected I ever would in my life. But I learned a ton. Um, and then a promise was made that we would be left an opportunity in business, but not necessarily an inheritance. And that opportunity came as a country club. So my brother grew up playing golf, and ultimately a little bit professionally. And then obviously my love for hospitality and sports. So purchased a local country club here in the area where I half joke I spent the first 7 years more managing construction than I did managing hospitality. And so at the age of 25 is when he purchased this club. He toured me around the facility, dropped me off at the aquatic center, said, I heard you have a swim team and this furniture won't do. Tell me what you need. And that was a direction. And again, I'm certain several of you can relate, either coming from family business or starting your own family business, of just not feeling like you had the skills or the experience or the knowledge to do your job well. And perhaps you didn't even want to do that job. But somehow we figure it out, right? And that's some of what I've learned in the barn. So, in this role with the family business, I took this mindset of I will always figure it out. And I kind of had confidence in myself to do that, whether that was with contractor and vendor relations, managing the P&L, people, culture issues, delivering first class service to our members, and how we go about creating programs. How do you grow a membership? Things I just wasn't familiar with. And then, of course, the family business side of navigating those family dynamics and the pressure to be a successful family business leader. Ultimately, I was, spinning my wheels. I was working 70 to 80 hours a week. It felt really lonely. I felt criticized regularly. And I just said there has to be a better way. But in the meantime, working those 70 to 80 hours a week led to what you would expect, right? And at 33, my body broke. I ended up having two surgeries, and I just knew that there had to be a better way if I was going to continue and ultimately lead this family business one day. So, myself, I love to turn to podcasts or books or resources like the ones that Sarah offers at Kennesaw State with the Family Enterprise Center, just ways to learn. And so, I happened to stumble across a podcast where I heard about the book Rocket Fuel. And so the book Rocket Fuel defines and clarifies the relationship between a visionary, which was my stepfather, and an integrator, which was me in the business. And it really helped me to improve communication with him and understand kind of where both parties were coming from. And that led me to read the book Traction, which is a book on EOS. EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system. And so we're just going to take a quick look at the six key components. Because again, if you're like I was, there's 136 issues running around in your head every day. And when I read the book Traction, it was as if everything kind of tied together and fell into one of these six areas. And it just felt like it was simplifying the process. Maybe not making it easier, but simplifying. So, six key components within the EOS model: vision, people, data, issues, process, and traction. I'll do a little slower path around it shortly. I chose to self implement at the private country club I was overseeing, meaning that I led my team through implementation of this operating system. And we ultimately completely transformed the culture of the club. Employees felt empowered and excited to come to work, which reduced turnover by about 34%. Members felt the difference in the experience they had, and we more than doubled profits in the last 3 years I was there. So now today, I find myself a stepmom to two wonderful kids. Our oldest just graduated from high school, so he's off to UGA later this year. Youngest just got his driver's license, so we are in the thick of teenage boys. I am still writing and I serve as a board member for the Wills Park Equestrian Center. Love running. I a rescue mom to one pup, and that's about as crazy as she is. Love being an auntie and everything outdoors. So ultimately, some promises were broken within my family business, and I became an EOS implementer a little less than a year ago, and love specifically working with family businesses to keep them together where they're enjoying doing business together and can still enjoy Thanksgiving dinner. So that's a little about me. Jumping into a little bit about EOS. According to business experts, business leaders need three key people in their corner for optimum success and growth. And those people are a coach, a peer group, and an operating system. So a coach offers personalized services to kind of identify areas of improvement with an individual. A peer group is going to be a network of other businesses that are facing challenges together. So those owners coming together, sharing ideas, experience, insights in order to foster some community and collaborative problem solving. And then an operating system is a set of standardized processes and systems with a business that ensures consistency, clarity, and efficient operations across all departments, facilitating growth and scalability. So sometimes when I say entrepreneurial operating system, folks will think of a software system. And this is not a software system. It's a way of aligning everyone in your business so that they are moving in the same direction, speaking the same language, operating from the same expectations with the same goals in mind. So there are several operating systems out there in the business world. If this isn't something you have explored, I certainly recommend, because again, if you're looking for that optimum growth and success, go find your people who you can bring into your corner with you. EOS is just one. Again, a little specifically about EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System is what it stands for, developed by a lifelong entrepreneur by the name of Gino Wickman, who also was a family business owner. So he led his family business for about 7 years before ultimately selling and exiting and then building the entrepreneurial operating system. It's a set of real world practical tools. There's no silver bullets or magic pills here. I'm not going to share anything that maybe you haven't heard before. It's magic is just how all the pieces come together to form one system. And then it's a way of harmonizing and orchestrating all the moving parts of your business. And lastly, when we talk about bringing on or implementing EOS, an implementer like myself is going to work on three things: strengthening your vision, so getting everyone in your organization 100% on the same page with where you are going and how you plan to get there. Traction is simply instilling discipline and accountability into your organization. So everywhere you go, you see people working towards your vision. And then lastly is healthy. How do we strengthen the health of your team? Make them more vulnerable, open, honest, and fun loving so that you enjoy spending time together. Just some fun facts, numbers about EOS. There's 846 others just like me out in the world today who have conducted 230 full-day sessions with business leaders and their leadership teams. There are over 28,000 companies running on EOS, and over 3 million copies of Traction have been sold. So just digging into this model a little bit more, vision again is just getting you 100% on the same page with where you are going and how you plan to get there with your team. The two bullet points under each of the six key components are just tools or disciplines we use to strengthen that key component. The second component is the people component. So you all have heard right people, right seats. EOS teaches how do you get the right people? How do you know what a right person is for your organization? Because everyone is different, especially in family businesses. And then how do you make sure you're in the right seat? I talked about how I was put into positions that I didn't feel qualified for and sometimes didn't even want, right? That wasn't a seat for me in that business. Data is running your business on facts, figures, and objective information rather than emotions and ego that so often drive decision making in entrepreneurial companies. And when your company gets really strong at vision, people, and data, your organization becomes so much more transparent. So your problems, challenges, obstacles, and opportunities are going to start just jumping out at you. And so that's where the fourth key component of the issues component comes into play. How do we capture those issues, tee them up, solve them, and make them go away forever? Process component is just getting all the most important things done in your business the right and best way every time. And when this is done properly, your business becomes more fun to manage and much more scalable. And then the last key component is a traction component. So again, traction is just executing on that vision day in and day out. So you do that by injecting discipline and accountability into your organization. So this traction component is where we're going to spend the remainder of the meeting on. The two tools or disciplines in this component are rocks, which are 90-day business priorities. So rocks are kind of like goals, but we write them as 90-day business priorities. And then the meeting pulse, which is what today is all about. So this is where we're going to live for the remainder of the meeting. The meeting pulse specifically ties into the cadence at which your business and the leaders in your business meet. So when we create a 90-day world within your business, meaning every 90 days you come out of your business, you take a look back and look at what you accomplished, celebrate your wins, learn from those hardships or the goals that maybe were missed over the last 90 days, and then jump back in and say, what are the most important things we as a company need to address in the next 90 days? And so get realigned around core values, around core focus, around what you're looking to accomplish this year, and then break it down and determine what are the most important things that need to happen in the next 90 days. And then you jump back into your business, and to make sure that you don't forget about that, because raise your hand or drop a one in the chat if you've ever set a New Year's resolution and by February or March forgotten where you're going or what was important to you on January 1st, right? So 90 days is just enough time to complete needle moving activities within your company, but short enough to keep everything top of mind so that you are staying focused on what's most important. Yeah, who makes it to March, Sarah? I don't know. I think there's like a New Year's resolution dead date, something. I forget what it's called. It's like March or February 12th, I think, or something, where just New Year's resolutions are out the window. So we've covered about me. We've done a little bit about EOS. Now we're going to jump into the meat and potatoes of today. How do we go about transforming your meetings? But before we talk about the how we transform meetings, I want to know why it's important to you to transform your meetings. So this is where you jump into the chat. Write in the chat, like why you showed up today. Why is it important to you to transform your meetings? What are you hoping to get from the remainder of this webinar? So while you're thinking about your why, and if you feel comfortable, drop it into the chat. This is a safe place. No one's going to go repeat this. We are all business owners. It's a little bit of that peer group situation. So what were you hoping to get from today? Are you feeling like, your meetings, you're leaving with less energy than you arrived with? Are you feeling a little scattered? Do you feel like meetings could be an email versus bringing time together? Could you get more out of, like, how do I get more out of my meetings? How do I lead my people? So I recently listened to a really great podcast by another local implementer here in the area, Brian Solka. He was on the Shift Spotlight podcast. If you want to listen to the whole thing, grab this QR code or shoot me an email and I'll send it to you later. But he stated that mastering a meeting can save a lot of time and reduce the number of meetings you have. And that's money. And for you all entrepreneurs, family business leaders, money is so important, right? So if you think about Like that's ultimately your bottom line. That's ultimately going to tie back to your profit. So if you can have and master more effective and valuable meetings with your team, and you can save time and reduce the number of meetings you're having, you're impacting that bottom line. So let's jump in. First, I'm going to ask you a couple questions to reflect. Again, feel free to drop it into the chat, your answers, if you feel comfortable sharing with everyone. If not, wherever you're taking notes or just in your mind, rate yourself on these next 3 questions. We're going to use this very scientific rating scale here, 0 to 10. And so 0 is like, we absolutely do not have this going on in my business right now. And 10 is we are fantastic, 2 thumbs up. So first question, how aligned is your entire organization around one plan or vision? Feel free to drop it into the chat. Again, we're a safe place. How aligned is your entire organization around one plan or vision? 2, what kind of accountability exists in your organization today? And you get to define accountability. So what type of accountability exists in your organization today? And then lastly, kind of meat and potatoes of today, how effective are your internal meetings? So if you're thinking on this scale of 0 to 10, how effective are your internal meetings? All right, you all are keeping those grades close to your heart, I see, but that's okay. We'll jump through. So let's jump into the basics before I kind of teach the meat and potatoes of it. Here are the basic things to know about an L10 meeting. So A, what's in the name? Why do we call it an L10 meeting? So we call this weekly leadership team meeting an L10 meeting because you just rated your meetings. And if I can guess, probably somewhere between 3, maybe a 5. And if you're superstar, you're around a 7. And our goal is to run a level 10, so a 10 meeting every week with our leadership teams. So we call this weekly leadership team meeting an L10 meeting because we want it to be a level 10. So that's the reason for the name. When do you hold this weekly leadership team meeting? Doesn't matter, but it needs to be once a week, same day, same time, and same place. And this means it's a standing meeting. And this is reinforcing the importance of saving 90 minutes to get together with your leadership team to transfer information, to have real, open, honest, vulnerable conversations to solve real issues in your business. And so the only reason to miss this meeting each week would be death. And I mean your death. I joke. But we joke about that. And then also, if you're on vacation, because rest is just as important for entrepreneurs as going hard in the paint. So you have this meeting once a week, same day, same time, same place, no exceptions. Once you get into this cadence, it creates a consistent weekly rhythm that creates trust, focus, and team connection, and your team adjusts to just knowing that this is a standing meeting on our calendar and we don't double book ourselves. Next, who should attend this meeting? So I said leadership team, but oftentimes we don't even know what a leadership team is. How do you define your leadership team? So your leadership team are your key individuals. So if you are leading a team, who are your direct reports? If you are the owner of your family-owned business or business leader within your family-owned business, who are your key employees? So oftentimes, you can equate this to kind of C-level suite. So it would be your CEO or president, maybe your vice president, general manager, director of operations, might be some other titles for these types of individuals, your key personnel. And then it's going to be your department level. So oftentimes it's the individuals who are responsible for marketing, sales, operations, which sometimes operations has multiple seats depending upon the product or service you're delivering. And then lastly, it's going to be your finance, sometimes administrative, HR, IT is sometimes what that might be, or some combination of those, but your key individuals, because you want to create a space where your key personnel can come together into a room and feel safe and have real, open, honest, vulnerable conversations, and know that it's not going to be shared with the rest of the team. So this is not a meeting. If you want it to be productive, this isn't a meeting where you're going to invite your technician, right? There is a level and there is an agenda for that type of meeting. But this meeting we're talking about today is a leadership team only. Some other basics with your L10 meeting. It has an agenda, and the agenda for our level 10 meeting is 90 minutes, and I'll share that with you in just a couple minutes. And the importance of having an agenda is it sets an expectation, and it allows those attending to make sure that they have properly prepared and can contribute to the meeting because they know, again, what to expect because you as a leader set the expectation. So there aren't surprises or thinking on a whim. You know, when you're leading people, everyone's shaped different. Everyone thinks and processes is different. So I was on a call yesterday about, some folks just need a little more time to process information. And so they don't feel comfortable contributing real valuable insight to certain conversations if they don't have the time to process it properly. So setting that agenda, again, sets that expectation, gives everyone time to prepare for the meeting properly. Lastly, no electronics. There are a couple exceptions, and I'm happy to discuss those with anyone offline. But in general, phones go to the middle of the table, airplane mode turned off. This is not a time for incoming emergency situations. This is a time to focus on your business, not work in your business. And then it's like Las Vegas. What stays in the room, what happens in the room stays in the room. So, like Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Whatever happens in an L10 meeting room stays there. It does not leave. It doesn't get shared. It's not gossiped about or even talked about. And lastly, regardless of what happens, in order to foster real vulnerable conversations, you have to remember that conflict may ensue in that room. But at the end of the day, you are leaving as a united front. You are leaving as a united leadership team. So let's jump in to what this agenda looks like. So an L10 meeting starts just like we did today with good news. So you spend about 5 minutes coming in. Again, most of the time, your leadership team members have all been working in the business. You've had phone calls, you've had people issues, you've had sales issues, you've had service issues, perhaps, regardless of, based on the company you're running. And you are all just trying to get in there on time because you know that an L10 meeting starts on time in the same place in the same room, no exceptions, right? So you're like, oh, I gotta get there on time. You're running in. Everyone just takes a breath and you start the meeting with good news. And the brave person starts first, doesn't matter who it is. Start with the brave one and go left. And that's a philosophy we use a lot in EOS just for efficiency purposes. So anyone can be the brave one. They share their one good thing from the last 7 days, personally or professionally. This starts to build trust amongst the team as well. And you get to know your coworkers a lot better, your team members a lot better. And then you move left because then there's no confusion on who's next, who hasn't gone, where do we need to jump to. Start with the brave one, go left. And then we jump into the second part. So once everyone's gone, you jump into the second part of the meeting, which is a scorecard review. You're like, well, shoot, I don't have a scorecard. Well, let me do a brief overview. You probably do in some capacity, but a company scorecard is 5 to 15 high level numbers that gives you an absolute pulse on the business. So think about if you were on a remote island or a beach vacation somewhere and someone, the cabana boy brought you just 5 numbers about your business, and it would give you an absolute pulse of what is going on in your business, even though you're not there. So the other cool thing with scorecards is what gets measured gets done, right? Again, I'm not going to share any magic pills with you, but what gets measured gets done. So I share this story about a manufacturing plant. So we'll just say that they make cars for the sake of this story. And this one particular plant is underperforming. And so the director of operations is sent to Pennsylvania to go look at this plant and see where the inefficiencies are and what's going on. And so he goes and he observes the morning shift. There's a whole morning shift working for 12 hours the first part of the day. And he observes them and he can't see anything super specific. But what he does notice is that they built 6 cars in their 12-hour shift. And so he takes a piece of chalk and he writes a huge 6 on the floor. And all the employees are looking at it. They're like, what is this guy doing? Right? Well, you all built 6 cars today. Okay. They leave, they go home. The next shift comes in. They see this giant 6 on the floor and they look around. They're like, why is there a 6 on the floor? He says, oh, the first shift, they built 6 cars today. Okay. So the 12 hours goes on. And at the end of the 12 hours, again, no real huge inefficiencies sticking out to this director of operations, but he notices that the afternoon or the second shift, they built 7 cars. So he erases the 6 and he writes a big 7 on the floor. And then that first shift comes back in and they see a 7. And they're like, oh, no, 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 we can do better than that. And so they do. And as the story continues, at the end of that shift, they made 9 cars. And all of a sudden, there is more happening because what gets measured gets done. And then as the team reached, a bottleneck ultimately, which it will, then you can start really digging into what items could be corrected in order to achieve 10, 12, 15 cars and equate that to what goes on in your business. So what gets measured gets done. Let's look at an example scorecard. So pretty basic. You can build this in Excel, right? A scorecard starts with measurables. So these are those 5 to 15 weekly numbers. And remember, if you're building a scorecard for your leadership team, they need to be higher level numbers. We're not measuring the little things in the business, but we are measuring those higher numbers. So weekly revenue, cash balance, sales calls, how many proposals were written or sent out. What's our customer satisfaction rating? Maybe customer retention would be another one to measure. Past due accounts. Um, so any of these type numbers, you may have heard measurables called KPIs previously. Same thing. We just call them measurables. And then we're looking to, you can have lagging indicators. So a lagging indicator would say be weekly revenue. But again, you're wanting to measure what gets measured gets done. So what do you want done in your organization? If you feel like sales is not running as efficiently as possible and they're not closing, well, what do you need to measure on the front end? How can we measure those leading indicators, right? So a leading indicator for a sales number, rather than measuring just sales revenue or proposals closed, maybe it's measuring meaningful conversations or warm leads added to the funnel, right? You can't, if the outcome isn't what you want it to be, look further up the funnel. There's probably some leading things that aren't happening either. So once those 5 to 15 high level numbers have been generated and you've identified what's most important for your business to measure, now you need to set weekly goals because we are looking at this weekly. So not monthly or annual or even quarterly goals. We're looking at these numbers weekly. So they need to be numbers and measurables that you can measure on a weekly basis. Set a goal for it, greater than or equal to. And then someone has to be responsible for reporting these numbers. And the person responsible for reporting should also be able to have some impact on the results. So they're not completely responsible for the results, but it's someone who should be able to impact that number one way or another. And then you track it every week for at least 13 weeks, because that's our 90-day world, right? And over time, you start to see some trends. So if we look on the fourth line down at sales meetings, you can see the last few weeks, those sales meetings start to drop off. The goal is 10, and he was doing really, really well. Robert was killing it, and he got to 12, 11, 15, and then it's 10, 9, 8, 8. And that's the red flag in your business. That's a red flag for your leadership team when you're in L10 meetings, right? This is where you start to find issues in your business before they become giant issues in your business because you're looking at these numbers on a weekly basis. So we would say, hey, Robert, we're going to drop sales meetings down to our issues list. And that'll make more sense in just a minute when I talk about it. So again, just an example of a company scorecard for you, but I highly suggest that you identify what are, 5 to 15 really important high-level numbers that give you an absolute pulse on your business. So jumping back into our agenda, we've shared good news. We're only spending 5 minutes reviewing that scorecard. So you are going through and you are just stating what the numbers are for the week. And if there's any issues, we're going to drop it down. And again, that'll make more sense in a minute. The next thing is we're spending 5 minutes doing a rock review. So EOS calls goals rocks. There's a whole theory behind that. And if you want to learn more, just email me afterwards, but we're going to call them rocks. And so this is every week you are coming back and you are looking at the company rocks, the 3 to 7 company rocks that you set for those 90 days, and the 3 to 7 individual rocks that each of the leadership team members created for that quarter. So again, rocks are 90-day business priorities. Each person on the leadership team is going to have 3 to 7 rocks, and the company itself will have 3 to 7 rocks for the quarter that an individual is ultimately responsible for. And you are just reading that rock and you're going to say on track, off track, or done. Meaning the rock is on track to be completed by the end of the quarter. It's off track, which means it might be an issue, or the rock is already done. And that's all we're saying. And then we're going to move on to a to-do list, we're going to move on to customer and employee headlines. So customer and employee headlines, again, we're just spending 5 minutes here, but this is where every leadership team member can drop in. This is just informational. We're just sharing, hey, we had a really great customer review, or we just got a new client, or we had a really bad Google review. Like, do we need to talk about this? Or employee headlines, areas for recognition. Someone, call someone out for core values and alignment, or their birthday, or maybe on the flip side, it's someone just put in their 2 weeks notice. And I feel like the rest of the team should know that John is leaving in 2 weeks. So just a place to share information, whether it's customer or employee headlines, positive or negative. And then we inject a little to-do list. So the to-do list drives the culture of accountability and follow through. And a to-do list is created or generated based on the prior week's solves of issues. And so I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but this is where it falls in the agenda. So I did want to drop it in, but we'll circle back to how do you create to-dos. So those to-dos get created, and when you review it at this stage of the meeting, you are saying it's done or not done. So a to-do is a 7-day action item generally created when you solve an issue in the prior week's meeting. I know it's a little confusing because I haven't gotten to the next section of the meeting, but it will make more sense in just a minute. So these areas, scorecard, rock review, customer and employee headlines, and to-do list, this is reporting only. And is really important, and it takes a lot of discipline to do this well with your leadership teams, because we're also used to sitting in a meeting and you have squirrel moments, right? And someone's like, oh, I want to deep dive into that issue, or I want to deep dive into this. In this section, it's so important that you stay on track and you are only reporting. And if you wish to have discussions, then we're going to jump to the next area and we're going to say, drop it down. And we're going to drop it down to the issues list. So if a scorecard number is off track, if a rock is off track, if a customer and employee headline needs to be further discussed, or if a to-do was not to done, drop it down and it heads down to the issues list. And this gives you an area to just get everyone aligned on where the business is in that reporting only, and then you're going to have 60 minutes to discuss issues. All right, so everyone's been in those meetings where, again, goes down a rabbit hole and you're just discussing and really nothing's coming of it. And you leave the meeting, you're like, this could have been an email. What did we even do? What's even accomplished? I don't even understand what we're doing next, right? So we spend 60 minutes discussing real issues in your business and solving them. And here's how we do it. We use this issue solving track. When Gino created EOS, he found that leadership teams were really good at getting into a room. Sometimes they would identify an issue. Sometimes they would spend a fair amount of time discussing an issue. Rarely did they ever get to solve, but they spent all this time discussing the heck out of an issue, with some people feeling heard, others feeling not heard, but no one really leaving with what's next and how are we moving the business forward. So Gino created this identify the root cause of an issue, discuss it, and solve it. So let's take a little deeper dive and give some examples of what this looks like. So you have your issues list. This is an example of an issues list. So here's a website rock off track. So someone's behind on a 90-day business priority. You have Darren Yu, right person. So people issues. I'm sure no one can relate to people issues in their business. By the way, fun fact, 82% of companies come to EOS because they have people issues. So if you have people issues, you're in great company. Andy S., right seat, also a people issue. Sales is off track. Again, none of us can relate to sales being off track, I'm sure. And it continues. So when we get to the IDS section of a meeting, the first thing you're going to do is make sure that you've captured all of your issues. They're all on the issues list. And then you're going to prioritize them 1, 2, and 3. And so 1, 2, 3. And then here's the meat and potatoes, and I can send you this afterwards if I talk too fast through it. But the first thing you want to do is identify the root cause of the issue. So if we look at Andy S. right seat, we want to do 3 things to identify what the root is of that. It's who, what. So who raised the issue? Who brought it up? Take ownership, like the real Slim Shady, right? Please stand up. Who raised it? Who on the team can help? So are you looking to a specific person for information or guidance or help on this issue? Or are you speaking to the entire team? And then what type of issue is it? And generally there's about 4 types of issues. So information, you are just sharing information about this issue. So just information to share. 2 is feedback. You're looking to receive feedback about an issue. Decision, you need a decision to be made regarding this issue, or there is a problem to solve. So 4 types of issues: information, feedback, decision, and problem. So once we've identified who brought the issue up, who on the team can help, and what type of issue it is, state your issue in 1 sentence. This is an executive skill. State your issue in 1 sentence. Sometimes I give some grace, and we can start with 2. But if you're telling a story, if we need that kind of information, we'll ask for it. So state it succinctly and briefly, and then the team can take some extra minutes to ask clarifying questions if needed. If nothing's needed and the issue's been clearly stated, then move on to discussing the issue. And when I talk about discuss the issue, everyone has a voice. They can contribute to the discussion. And when everyone contributes to solving an issue, they feel valued as team members. They feel heard. So be careful as a leader that you're not making it uncomfortable for others to speak up in the room. You want that feedback and you want to foster that culture of being open and honest in the room. And then you say it only once. Because if you're saying it more than 1 time, you're politicking. No one likes that. We heard you the first time. And so as the conversation gets redundant or everyone's spoken their side, then you move to solve as a team and you identify what is the next best thing we can do as a team to make this issue go away forever. Sometimes you can make the entire issue go away forever, and sometimes it needs to be broken into steps. And then you take that solve, and that solve becomes a to-do. And so your scribe for the meeting, your secretary for the meeting, just adds it to the to-do list. And next week, we're going to come back and revisit it because a to-do is a 7-day action item. So to-dos get to done in 7 days. And we're going to check on that because next week it's part of the agenda. And I'm going to ask you, was that done? And you're going to have to look at the rest of the team and say yes or no. And it will drive accountability and discipline in your organization. So this is an IDS track. Once you've identified the first issue, the root of the first issue, you discuss it briefly and you move to solve and capture that to do. That issue goes away and you move on to issue number 2 and your priorities, and you do the same thing there. And once you get through 3, then you go back and you reprioritize based on the issues remaining on the list. What are the next 3 issues we need to discuss? And as your team gets really, really good at identifying, discussing, and solving issues, you're solving 6, 9, 12 issues in a week. And it doesn't have to be multiples of 3. You can stop before. So that takes us through 85 minutes of a meeting. So the last 5 minutes of a meeting are maybe the most important. Don't always move the needle as much as IDS, but really important is conclude. So in conclude, you recap the to-dos. So you go back up to your to-dos list. You read each of the to-dos and the owner of that to-do, because only one person can be responsible. If more than one person's responsible, no one's responsible. And then you move to cascading messages. So if there's any messages that pertain to a specific team, so if something was discussed relating to the sales team, the sales manager that's in the leadership team meeting, the L10 meeting, needs to take that message back to their team. And so you just acknowledge that that message needs to cascade through a specific team. And then what's the most important part of conclude is rate the meeting. And you're going to rate the meeting again on that lovely scientific scale, 0 to 10. And you're not rating how much fun you had, but rather, did everyone show up on time? Did we honor the commitment? Were we open and honest? Did everyone feel heard? Did we tackle real issues? Did we move the business forward in this meeting? And we're using Olympic scoring here. What I mean by that is everyone starts with a 10. You start every meeting with a 10, and if anyone was late to a meeting or we got off track or we were distracted or we weren't committed or we weren't open and honest, you start doing little deductions for those throughout. And then anytime a meeting is rated under an 8, you want to get feedback from that individual. So ratings, under 8, invite that feedback because that shows that every meeting with every person matters and you are looking for consistent growth and improvement within your company. So with that, I'm going to open it up to any questions with the chat. Can you give an example of stating the issue in this format? So one sentence, so maybe that people issue, right? So Andy S. right seat, I think that's very clear, right? That is a very succinct and basic way of stating an issue. And then if the team, because the team's been working with Andy too, so Andy, they may have their own idea of what that means, but then the team can ask clarifying questions back in return, right? But I'm not saying, oh, I have an issue with my direct report, Andy S., and she just never shows up on time and people just don't like her. And I'm just having a really hard time getting information from her. She's not completing her projects on time. Like, I'm just rolling. You're tuning out. You don't it's not necessary to share all of that unless the team needs it to determine what next steps need to happen with Andy S. right? But by saying, hey, I'm having issues with Andy S. and it's a right seat issue, that means there's something missing with productivity. Or, she has the culture, she has the right personality, she's the right fit for the company, but somewhere in performance is lacking, or she doesn't want the seat. So I've already shared enough in that one sentence, by saying like sales revenue off track. Like, oh, that's true. The one thing I might add to that would be, I believe sales is off track due to this. What do you all think as a team? And kind of open it up for discussion.
That getting down to one sentence, that is powerful. It's
Mhm.
difficult. How long does it normally take people to develop that skill?
Yeah, it's I've working with several teams, and it is one of the things that can be very difficult to get to. And some teams are certainly wordier than others. So, but to do this really well takes at least a 3-month commitment, if not 6, to really work. So if you're leading a team, have some grace with those on the team. But also don't be, have some kind of symbol. In EOS, we use little foam animals, and so if someone goes off track, like a squirrel, right? You have a squirrel moment, we like toss the squirrel at them. But you leading a meeting, maybe it's just you just kind of raise your hand and be like, hey, one sentence, right? And kind of encourage that behavior that you're looking for amongst the team, because it is difficult to do. And so generally I start with like, okay, 2 sentences, maybe 3. And then in a couple of weeks, we're going to work to 1 sentence, maybe 2. And then in a few more weeks, we're going to really, I want 1 sentence. So
So
give
give
them
them
some
some
time.
time. Are a lot of these things that people could work on before the meeting in their own personal prep when they are going to bring an issue? They can work with themselves or maybe even sit down with ChatGPT and say, hey, all of these things are going on. Help me synthesize this down to one clear sentence to make that impact.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And
And
I
I
think that's the importance of an agenda, right? It goes back to the importance of an agenda because you're setting the expectation. You want your leadership team to bring issues to the meeting. Or if you're running this, you can run these on a software. And so I'm happy to share that if that's something you're interested in. Um, and so you can put those issues in as they arise throughout the week. And then you're giving them time to kind of process and prepare for the meeting so that when you're in the meeting, you're not taking time as a leader to allow everyone to process literally everything, right? People are coming in, they know what to expect, they get used to this cadence, they get used to the format, they get used to where areas smoke out issues, how to just say drop it down, and then you get really good at prioritizing 1, 2, and 3. And then for those that raise issues, yeah, they're already prepared to state this in 1, maybe 2 sentences. And so you're that much further ahead because you've given them the runway of saying, here's what I'm going to expect of you.
I think that's also a very helpful way to be more inclusive in our meetings. So often, whoever thinks the fastest and speaks the loudest, their voice is heard, and all of my introverts, they're still sitting there trying to process, is this something worth bringing up? But by having an agenda and having this continual pattern, they can better prepare and feel a little more confident in sharing. So then we get the benefit of hearing from everyone on the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, especially in family businesses where you have the generations. And so there's that natural sense of respect. And am I allowed to speak or should I not speak? And so running meetings with other family members where everyone is coming into that meeting and everyone's voice matters. And that's the culture that's been created. And the expectation is that we want everyone to participate because everyone is valuable, and it's really, really cool to see. And you and I were talking about this a little bit before we started the meeting, Sarah, was, this tool specifically is the one when I'm working with clients, this is the first one they say, this is working for us. I come into every meeting, I'm like, what's working? What's not working? How can I help with the tools? And this one always gets rave reviews. I mean, always is obviously, but 97% of the time, this is the tool that's like, this tool has made a huge difference in my leadership style. and just helping everyone feel like they matter and everyone have a voice within the organization. And I think that's so important specifically to family businesses too.
I agree, especially when you have multiple generations working together. You see that dynamic of can I speak out against my mother, or there goes our cousin again. Is he or she contributing? And by having this structure, you're going to see so much benefit. What have been the hardest implementation points that you've seen? Like, where are the pain points? Is it the speaking in one sentence or identifying scorecard metrics?
Scorecard is generally the hardest for folks to come up with. And you know, when going through implementation with an implementer, we walk you through that process. And I spend a lot more time on developing a scorecard. But regardless of how much time I spend developing a scorecard with a team, a scorecard will always take 1 to 3 months to fall in love with. And so you're constantly tweaking it because the initial things that you think are important to measure, you later learn like, oh, I only wanted to measure it because I know it's doing well. Okay, well, a measurable that's doing well doesn't necessarily need to be measured. I mean, it's great to be like, yay, we're doing great. But that's not an area in your business where you need to see action take place. And so what gets measured gets done. We want to measure the things that are in the red every week because they're not going to improve if we're not measuring them. And that's really hard for business owners to be okay with kind of a microscope being put on an area of the business that we know is underperforming. But it's not going to improve, and we're not going to come up with solutions to improve it, which, a poorly performing measurable will get dropped down to the issues list. So then it can be discussed. And it's really cool in those discussions when you have a measurable that's maybe based in the sales department, but then to see where like finance or ops comes up with really creative solutions that sales wouldn't have ever come up with. So that's kind of the power of having your entire leadership team in a room together.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. This has been incredible. And for everyone that is watching this live or in the recording, if you have additional questions, here's how you can get a hold of Jacqueline.
Um, yeah, no, thank you all so much. I know you all are so busy. And I ran through this. If you want kind of a one-pager follow-up, please reach out to me. EOS Entrepreneurial Operating System, one of our core values is help first. So you will find that every implementer within our community is happy to help entrepreneurs and family business leaders like yourself. But please feel free to reach out to me via phone, text, email. The QR code takes you to my landing page, my website. If you want a book of the traction book to read, just the first chapter gives you a great overview. I'm happy to send you a copy. And then if you want to learn more about EOS, we also do 90-minute complimentary meetings with you and your leadership team.
Great. So thank you again, Jacqueline, and thank you all for being here. So this is just one example of how we support family businesses, whether you're growing or building or transitioning your company. So members of the Family Enterprise Center get access to programming like this year round, as well as a strong network of peers. So if you're not a member yet, we would love to have you. This is a place where you belong.